Well,
thank you.
We will see you back here Monday. Thanks. Safe travels. Thank you for joining us. Outnumbered starts right now.
Fox News alert: President Trump is now heading back to Washington from Vietnam after cutting short his second summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un amid a disagreement over sanctions and just how far the regime was willing to go in dismantling its nuclear program. This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis. Here today, my partner on the couch, Harris Faulkner, Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, Fox News analyst and co-host of Benson and Harf on Fox News Radio, Marie Harf, and joining us on the couch, I can't think of a better man for today than this one, Fox News senior strategic analyst and retired four-star general Jack Keane. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's delighted to be back.
Yeah, we've had a great time before the show talking about your experiences in Vietnam and getting your take on Kim Jong-un. I can't wait to share that with our audience. You've got a lot of great things to say, so thank you for being here.
Looking forward to it.
Terrific. All right, the high-stakes second North Korea summit ending earlier with no agreement reached. President Trump saying the U.S. would not give in to the regime's demand that all sanctions be lifted in order to secure the closure of its main nuclear facility, but maintaining hopes that the meeting set the stage for a deal down the road. Here's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the president before they departed in Vietnam.
It was a very interesting 2 days, and I think actually it was a very productive 2 days, but sometimes you have to walk. And this was just one of those times.
I'm hopeful that the teams will get back together in the days and weeks ahead and continue to work out. It's a very complex problem. We have said since the beginning that this would take time.
Basically, they wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that.
A short time ago, the ranking Democrat member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Menendez, saying the president's strategy is putting the U.S. in a worse position.
What we saw in Hanoi was amateur hour with nuclear weapons at stake and the limits of reality TV diplomacy. What I worry about is that the president, by giving Kim Jong-un the international not only recognition but almost acceptance from going from pariah to an accepted international leader, has squandered the leverage that we have.
But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell applauding the president's strategy along with his decision today to pull out of the summit.
It was smart to bring Kim Jong-un to Singapore and to Vietnam to expose the North Korean delegation to the kind of economic prosperity that could be possible if he were to choose a new path. High-level diplomacy can carry high-level risk, but the president's to be commended for walking away when it became clear insufficient progress had been made on denuclearization.
And many Democratic lawmakers are also crediting the president for not taking a bad deal. Chief political anchor Brett Baer, host of Special Report, joins us live from Hanoi, Vietnam. Brett, thank you so much for joining us and sticking around. Let me ask you, I mean, in business, this is the walk away. The point at which you reset the negotiation, when you stand up from the table and you walk away. Is that what it felt like there? Because that's what it looks like from here.
Yeah, and I think you're hearing administration officials behind the scenes saying that they feel good about this decision, that this was the right move because Kim didn't deliver. They looked at Singapore as establishing a relationship between the two leaders. They looked at getting a roadmap to deliverables. It didn't happen. And because Kim didn't come to the table with everything, the U.S. said, well, that's not going to work for us, and walked away. The president put it pretty well in the news conference from the point of there was not going to be a release of the sanctions unless the U.S. got everything it wanted. I do think that there is a lot of investment in this relationship, and the way the president talks about Kim Jong-un has been unsettling for some who look at this guy as a brutal dictator, which he is. But as far as the people on Capitol Hill who are in the national security circle, I think they're breathing a sigh of relief that a bad deal didn't get across the finish line.
You know, Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey player, used to say you miss all the shots, Brett, that you don't take. The president took a couple shots, and he sat down with this dictator. Where does this put us in the world view on the world stage?
Well, Harris, it puts us that missiles are not flying, tests are not going. The relationship was not storming off at the end. There's the prospect, at least, of moving negotiations forward, but not a date set. And I think Mitch McConnell put it pretty well, that there is going to be a long train ride for Kim Jong-un back to Pyongyang to think about what was left on the table. He's here in Vietnam for 2 more days. There's probably a lot of pressure from China and South Korea to get something together on this front. The president, meantime, says we did what we could do. We're moving on. And, you know, as has been mentioned here and at the news conference, Reagan did it at Reykjavik in Iceland. This is a different scenario, a different leader, and it is a decision that these 2 leaders came to.
Brett, fantastic job leading our coverage half a world away. Come home. We look forward to it. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you.
General, let me ask you, I mean, because it's difficult when you stand up and you do the walk away. You know, you have to give the other side, there has to be a way to come back together, but it also has to seem real at the same time, that you mean it and it's not just a ploy. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I think it's largely a positive step as opposed to a setback, because clearly what the United States has done is really staked out its claim. We are for denuclearization. There's been some media reporting that there was a belief that President Trump, what he really wanted was normalization of relations with North Korea, permit them to keep their nuclear weapons as long as there was no threat. Well, no, that
wasn't the case. Yeah, it turns out that reporting was bad.
We know that denuclearization is on the table, and it's not going to get taken off the table until they're willing to commit to it and actually see some results of it. So that is a very good thing. And listen, too much is being made of the personal diplomacy thing. This is the president's style. But Reagan and Gorbachev had personal diplomacy, and they liked one another. They had 5 meetings. And their second meeting is when Reagan walked away. And it was at Reykjavik. And Gorbachev put on a table as a surprise, I want you to take down Strategic Defense Initiative, or we're not going forward. So he got up and left and went home to Nancy to have dinner. He wanted to get home in time for dinner. And one of the humorous stories that happened in big power diplomacy. So it took 5 meetings, and finally, the most significant reduction in nuclear weapons took place because of the relationship that they established and the self-interest that each country had. And it also led to the major transformation of the Soviet Union. So where are we? We're in the beginning of this process. I think there'll be multiple meetings between the 2, and we'll see where this goes. I mean, is Kim Jong-un 20 years to develop nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles? He's got 40 or 50 of them. He's got a significant arsenal. Is he going to trade all of that for economic prosperity? I suspect not. Will he trade it for security and safeguard that there'll be no taking down in the regime and maybe economic prosperity? There's a possibility of that. But we have to maintain a healthy skepticism about this whole thing.
It seems to me, though, that the proposition before him is, how do you best hold on to power? Is it by better economics or keeping your nukes? You can't have both, and we have to assume that his goal is to hold on to power. Can the president make the case that he's more likely to hold on to power with good economics versus nukes?
Well, it's an interesting question you pose. Certainly, Kim Jong-un has hardliners in his country. And just before the first Singapore summit, it was interesting, he fired his top generals. And he brought in younger ones to take their place, which got my interest because that meant that they're more beholden to him. And if he's going to make change, he needs them to support him. Kim Jong-un can't move too quickly. If he goes too quickly, he's going to lose the support of his hardliners, and it puts him actually at risk.
Yeah, because they off the people they don't agree with.
Yeah.
And it's those hardliners I wanted to ask you about. So they want all sanctions lifted for the closure of North Korea's main nuclear complex. We're never going to agree to that. But who's his audience for that kind of a demand? Is it people inside his country? Did he really think he could do that kind of a deal?
Well, this is the deal that they made in the past, and it's always been successful. I mean, they have offered to take down facilities in the past in exchange for relief on sanctions and the promise that we will denuclearize our weapons. And they never fulfilled the promise. So why wouldn't he play the same deal?
Different negotiator.
It always worked.
Right.
It always worked. And I'm certain the hardliners around him said, put it on the table. It seems like President Trump really wants a deal.
He's got some issues at home, and it blew up in their faces. There'll be another round here, and it's going to be very different.
I think it's interesting to test the proposition of how much like a Gorbachev Kim Jong-un actually is. And I know the intelligence community right now is looking at that exact question. How far is he willing to push? How much is he willing to change North Korea and what has relied so much on nuclear weapons to possibly relieve those sanctions? For me, this is also a question about process. When you elevate the negotiations to the presidential level, there's often a lot more work done behind the scenes at the Secretary of State level, at the expert level, to set the table for a final deal. It's clear that a lot of those issues, what denuclearization means, for example, what the pace of sanctions relief will be, those weren't worked out before a presidential level meeting. So now the process question is, how do we work those out at a lower level before we elevate it again, where we could hopefully get something? Those have to be addressed.
Well, I've been told by sources that they were worked out on our side, Katie, just not on their side, and that the ball keeps moving as to what denuclearization means for Kim Jong-un.
Well, the North Koreans are going to continue to test the United States as they have since we've had this issue with their nuclear capability, them testing how far we're willing to go with their missile testing. But one part of this that hasn't been discussed as much is the domestic implications of this for Kim Jong-un. We're talking about this from an international perspective with our allies, denuclearization. But when it comes to a new economy, more of a free market, it's very difficult to square the circle on Kim Jong-un continuing to be this tyrannical figure in his country while people have some kind of economic freedom, because 1 in 10 people in North Korea are slaves. Millions of people are there and they're in gulags. I mean, this is going to require a complete turnover of their society and culture, and that does not happen in 1 or 2 meetings. That happens over the period of a number of years, even decades. And so that is another consideration that we haven't really even talked about from a human rights perspective. I mean, the president today gave Kim Jong-un the benefit of the doubt when it came to what he knew about
and that's what he
says. Exactly, that's what he says.
We don't
diplomatically. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. That he may be saying that as a way to continue the negotiations as human rights not being on the table. But there's still a lot domestically with North Korea that has to be sought out in addition to denuclearization.
Although to Marie's point, it's hard to believe that Mike Pompeo would show up without all of his ducks in a row. I mean, I don't know.
But you need both sides for diplomacy.
Right. No, the other side for sure. But that was Harris's point.
Now,
It was just the North Korean side.
The Koreans wouldn't meet with us until just a few weeks ago. So it wasn't that we didn't try.
Right. Yeah.
Coming up in the next hour, Harris will talk more about the summit with someone who knows North Korea as well as anyone. He has been there several times, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Bill Richardson. Coming up on Outnumbered Overtime at the top of the hour. We look forward to that. Tensions growing between nuclear-armed rivals India and Pakistan after an Indian fighter pilot is shot down and captured. The president has said that the U.S. is involved in trying to ease the tensions. We have the latest on that. Plus, former Trump attorney Michael Cohen back on Capitol Hill today after an explosive hearing yesterday where he ripped the president while Republicans slammed his credibility, what it means politically and legally.
This is step one in the Democrats' crazy efforts to impeach the president of the United States. And the best they could come up with is a guy who is going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress.
Sleep Number is ranked #1 in customer satisfaction with mattresses by J.D. Power. Save $500 on select Sleep Number 360 smart beds, only for a limited time.
This is breaking news. We're awaiting a news conference with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after Israel's Attorney General announced that he intends to indict the Prime Minister on corruption charges pending a final hearing. This comes after 2 years of investigations into Netanyahu and his wife. Israel's Attorney General says the charges include 1 count of bribery, 2 counts of fraud, and breach of trust. This would mark the first time in Israel's history that a sitting prime minister is charged with a crime. The prime minister has denied any wrongdoing and will speak about the charges at the top of the next hour. Former Trump attorney Michael Cohen back on Capitol Hill today. This is day 3 of testimony, this time behind closed doors, before the House Intelligence Committee. This after yesterday's dramatic public hearing before the House Oversight Committee, where Cohen ripped his former boss. President Trump hit back at Cohen and blasted the Democrat-led committee over the timing of yesterday's hearing during his second North Korea summit. Watch it.
I tried to watch as much as I could. I wasn't able to watch too much because I've been a little bit busy. But I think having a fake hearing like that and having it in the middle of this very important summit is really a terrible thing. He lied a lot, but it was very interesting because he didn't lie about one thing. He said no collusion with the Russian hoax.
But Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal believes Cohen's testimony is just the beginning of a new round of investigations into the president's activities.
His testimony was highly incriminating, explosive, a bombshell in the leads it should provide if corroborated by other witnesses and documents. Plainly, he laid out a roadmap of criminality committed by the president that needs to be followed not only by the special counsel but by other prosecuting offices. Right now, no aspect of Trump world is not under investigation.
So what's going on behind closed doors now? Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is on Capitol Hill to catch the news as it pops. Catherine?
Thank you, Harris. Michael Cohen has been in a secure facility behind me for about 3 hours. As you mentioned, this is his third day of testimony on Capitol Hill. It's important to note that really there are a lot of indicators now that the Democrats are looking for some kind of exit ramp or transition from these allegations of Russian collusion to investigations that really focus on financial crimes. And part of that reason is when you start to unpack Michael Cohen's testimony from yesterday. First and foremost, Cohen's testimony debunked the BuzzFeed report that he was directed by the president to lie to Congress about a 2016 Moscow Trump Tower real estate project. Cohen testified that the decision to lie was on him.
I lied to Congress when Mr. Trump stopped negotiating the Moscow Tower project in Russia. Mr. Trump did not directly tell me to lie to Congress. That's not how he operates.
Cohen's testimony also undercut a central allegation in the Trump dossier. The Trump dossier was the opposition research that was funded by the DNC and the Clinton campaign, and it was really a foundational piece to the FBI's counterintelligence investigation when it opened in July of 2016. Michael Cohen testified that he never traveled to Eastern Europe in 2016.
Have you ever been to Prague? I've never been to Prague. Never have. I've never been to the Czech Republic.
You testified today you have never been to Prague and have never been to the Czech Republic. Do you stand behind that statement?
Yes, I do.
One of the most important pieces of testimony as it related to Russia and allegations of collusion came from Cohen when he talked about a conversation he was part of that involved then-candidate Trump, a political operative, Roger Stone, and Stone was relaying information he had got from the head of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. Cohen testified that the conversation took place in the summer of 2016.
Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, "Wouldn't that be great?"
There was a follow-on line of questioning that was also important because of the questioner. It came from Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She was, if you will, a victim of the hacks as head of the DNC. And she wanted to try and draw this connection between Roger Stone, who was apparently talking or communicating with WikiLeaks, to the Trump campaign. Here's that exchange.
Was Mr. Stone a free agent reporting back to the president what he had done? Or was he an agent of the campaign acting on behalf of the president and with his apparent authority?
No, he was a free agent.
A free agent that was reporting back to the president what he had done?
Correct.
The other important point here, Harris, is that if you think back to the summer of 2016, there was no public recognition from the U.S. intelligence community that the hacked emails were the work of the Russians. So again, when you think about those conversations, you can't use the knowledge you have now to go back and say, aha, therefore there was Russian collusion, because that was not known at the time, that connection to WikiLeaks. Harris.
That's important information. Fascinating. Catherine Herridge, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Katie, you know, this went kind of wide and far yesterday.
Yes,
they got into race and all sorts of other categories. But Does it drill down to know, is the president right? There was no collusion. He didn't witness, and Michael Cohen said it more than once.
Right.
He didn't have a way to even show that, no evidence for that. Is that really why everybody was in that room yesterday, or was it something else?
No. Democrats wanted to have that hearing for a couple of reasons. To get Michael Cohen back on the record before he goes to prison. Democrats say because he lied to Congress, it was his obligation to come and clear up some of the things that he said, the statements that he made. But this yesterday was a door that they opened to a number of other people, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump Jr., a number of the attorneys involved in the Trump Tower meeting here in Washington, D.C. All of the people that Michael Cohen repeatedly named, that was not done by accident. That was done so that Democrats can look at the list and say, who can we subpoena now to ask more questions about these situations that we want some more answers on? Lanny Davis was sitting behind Michael Cohen. He is representing him as his lawyer. This whole thing was highly political. Lanny Davis is, of course, a longtime operative for the Clintons. And yesterday, the question is, did we learn anything new? We learned there is no collusion, according to Michael Cohen. That's consistent with what the president said. And yes, we learned about the president's character and behavior, but we knew all about that already. So in terms of the politics here, I'm not sure it moved anyone on the left or anyone on the right in terms of moving forward with the conversation.
The two checks that were featured there in some of the exhibits, we did not know that those checks had been written into the presidency. So that was something.
That was new, correct. And the questions around, what that was for, Michael Cohen says it was a reimbursement. And the question there is whether there was an FEC violation in terms of election law for those payments.
Yeah.
So, Marie, why do it this way? Because usually it's a lot of show and pomp and circumstance, and it's, can be spectacle. But are you really getting much? Why don't Democrats, for the most part, 100%, take this behind closed doors if they think they can even believe him?
Well, there have been 2 hearings behind closed doors this week and 1 in the public. We've often talked on this couch about public accountability, so I actually like seeing someone have to
shouldn't you gather the facts first and then show the public?
Well, we have gathered a lot of facts, and I will say there were a couple other new things we learned yesterday that I find interesting. One is that Michael Cohen testified that he was a witness to other criminal behavior by President Trump that he can't outline publicly because the Southern District of New York is currently investigating. We don't know what that is, but it gave some insight into the fact, and this has been rumored and discussed by people like Andy McCarthy, that the Southern District holds more legal jeopardy. We know they're looking at other threads. I do think there will be follow-up questions about the WikiLeaks conversation that Cohen testified to, the alleged conversation. Donald Trump answered questions under oath in a response to the special counsel, including, did you ever discuss WikiLeaks with Roger Stone? He answered no. If there is evidence to corroborate Michael Cohen, and that's a big if,
Yeah,
but
that's
if there
the big part, because you have a known criminal liar on
But if there is, Harris, that's a problem for the president.
So that's the big part. What can you corroborate?
Right. We'll see.
We'll move on.
Yeah.
Although the president left Vietnam with no deal, history was made when Kim Jong-un took questions from foreign reporters for the very first time. Is that in itself a significant step forward and a sign that the president's approach is working?
Kim, are you ready to denuclearize?
If I'm not willing to do that, I won't be here right now.
New reaction to a rare and striking moment as President Trump and North Korean Chairman Kim Jong-un wrapped up talks at their second summit in Vietnam. While the president and Kim sat across from each other, reporters in the room shouted questions at the dictator, and through a translator, he answered, marking the first time that Kim Jong-un has taken questions from foreign journalists ever. Watch.
Chairman Kim, are you ready to denuclearize?
If I'm not willing to do that, I won't be here right now.
Are you discussing human rights with President Trump?
인권도 논의하고 있습니까?
We're discussing everything.
Chairman Kim, are you ready to allow the United States to have an office in Pyongyang?
It's actually an interesting question. I would like to actually hear that answer.
Well, I think that is something which is welcomeable.
Wow. General, what do you think of that?
It's great. I actually think it has something to do with him being around President Trump.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's very casual, informal with the media. He responds to questions continuously. He wears his thoughts on his sleeve, in terms
Our
of
president,
in terms of his directness. I suspect he's had some impact on this guy. And also, as a leader of North Korea, as much as it's a closed society, he's moved out of that country more than his predecessors have. And he's been to China many times, obviously to Singapore. He was educated in high school in Switzerland, so he has some sense of the world beyond North Korea. But I think mostly it's, I know somebody that read the letters that Kim Jong-un sent to the president.
Really? Oh.
And
give us the goods.
The only thing I can say about it is that everybody who's read those letters are surprised by the warmth and affection that are in those letters. I think to include the president. And it's almost like a father-son relationship that's expressed there, is what the person told me who's seen several of the letters. So I think that's interesting. I think he's reacting to the president more than anything.
But is he looking for a way out? I mean, maybe that's what that implies, is that he is taken over this regime, maybe doesn't feel like he can hang on to it, and he's looking for a way out.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
I'm not sure it's real. I mean, I think that they, for as much as President Trump knows how to work Kim Jong-un in terms of taking advantage of the fact that he likes Western culture and movies, and he's trying to imply that he can have this great economic power and still maintain, his own power in the regime, Kim Jong-un is studying the president. And I agree with you. I suspect that he's been studying the White House and the way the press pool asks questions and thought about the way that he might react if they asked him those questions in this manner, and he decided to answer those questions. So I would just be very skeptical of the authenticity of the love between Kim Jong-un and the president.
No, I think that's the first reaction, is to be very skeptical about the authenticity. But there's also, I mean, Marie, there's got to be another side where he has to want to believe in his mind that he could survive and have some economic relief.
Well, I think we should not forget in this conversation that we are talking about someone who, for the first time, yes, took questions from Western journalists and also kills members of his own family.
Oh, no, no one forgot that.
But I think we should bring it up for our viewers to not forget it while we're talking about it. As part of this conversation,
We've said it repeatedly.
Well, and I'm saying it again, because some of the president's language, I think because of this relationship they've developed, whether it's about Otto Warmbier, whether it's just about Kim Jong-un in general, I think it does concern people that the president is not entirely clear-eyed about the nature of this regime. And the reason that matters is if the president, Melissa,
that's the way he talks. Well, how do you know that's what's going on in his mind, in the president's mind? I mean, you're giving Kim Jong-un credit for being duplicitous, and you're not giving the president credit for understanding the nuance.
All I'm saying is, what concerns me is that so much of whether this will succeed is based on whether Kim Jong-un is ready to change his country.
Right.
Whether he is ready to change the calculation and give up weapons they spent a lot of money and time developing. And that is very much an open intelligence question. And I worry that the president's judgment on that is clouded because of this close relationship they've developed, and the president overlooks the human rights.
Wow, you think he's really naive.
Question for the general, though, and you mentioned the word intelligence.
Not crazy.
How strong is our intelligence on what North Korea has, and does this make it better?
Yeah, we have good intelligence on North Korea. We don't know where everything that is buried under the ground in terms of nuclear weapons are, but we know where most things are. And certainly when they eventually, hopefully, do give us an inventory of their weapon sites, we'll be able to tell very quickly if that list is accurate, because we know so much about what they have. I mean, he supposedly, as a result of the discussions that they had, you probably read the same thing that I read, that when he disclosed that he would be willing to give up his main nuclear enrichment site, the president came back to him and said, well, what about the other two? And he was taken back by the fact that we knew about the other two. So, yeah, we've got very good intelligence, but it's not perfect intelligence, obviously, because it's so much of a closed society.
Yeah.
But on your point, listen, I don't think you have to worry about the president being clear-eyed about this guy is a thug, he's a killer, runs the most repressive regime in the world. The whole team around the president knows that. The president knows that as well. But it's just his style of personal relationship leading to possibly a positive step forward. And I think we make too much of it sometimes.
That Green New Deal proposed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez seems to have Democrats in a little bit of a pickle. Leadership not so quick to embrace the far-left plan. Senator McConnell with a strategy to force Senate Democrats to take a stand on it one way or the other.
It's not a debate. It's a diversion. It's a sham. What is your plan, Leader McConnell? What is your answer? We know what you don't like. What do you like? Anything?
I've been reading with some amusement that our friends on the other side seem to be reluctant to vote on the Green New Deal. If this is such a popular thing to do and so necessary, why would one want to dodge the vote?
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell there promising a vote on the Green New Deal as Democratic leaders wrestle with how to handle the progressive proposal. A vote would force divided Democrats to go on the record regarding the plan from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer reportedly floating a strategy within his caucus to vote present to give lawmakers political cover. And Senator Schumer also blasting Leader McConnell over forcing this vote.
I would ask the leader, and we're going to keep asking him, and every Republican in this chamber, what they would do about climate change. Until Leader McConnell and his Republican majority answer those questions, the games they're playing here will have no meaning. This is not a debate. It's a diversion. It's a sham.
Meantime, yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying climate change is a top national security issue. Watch.
It is a defense issue. We have the testimony and will then be current with additional current testimony on what it means from the generals and the admirals and the national security experts as to what migration issues are affected by drought and climate issues around the world.
She said general.
Well, and speaking of that, General, I want to stick on this national security piece because the Pentagon has repeatedly said publicly, they've said it's a national security issue. They call it a threat multiplier in some ways, not just that it affects conflicts possibly, but also mission readiness. What's your take on that security aspect of climate change?
Well, I don't think it's a top national security issue, but it clearly has national security implications. We've got 128 military sites around the world. No military compares to that. So there's implications there for those sites. And we know for a fact that the Arctic, the ice is melting. And the maritime implications of that and the natural resources are there certainly have military implications. Russia is moving into that area as a result of it, and we have been slow to react to it. And certainly drought and famine the social unrest that can cause and the lack of stability that can create and as people start to move, all of that has security implications. I think it's more long-term than it is near-term, to be frank about it. I worry much more about big power competition with Russia and China and Iran's malign behavior in trying to dominate the Middle East and the success that they've been able to achieve. North Korea now no longer threatening to use ICBMs against us. Thankful for that. Radical Islam is thriving in the world out there. These things concern me a lot more, but I do think we have to keep our eye on this. We got to be intelligent about it, and we should be very informed.
And we even saw in Syria, at the beginning of the civil war in Syria, they were going through a serious famine and drought. And there are a lot of people that think that help was one of the things that propelled some of this unrest. Harris, I want to ask you about the politics of this now. Mitch McConnell forcing this vote. And you heard Chuck Schumer say, look, if you don't like the Green New Deal, Republicans, put forward your own proposal.
Yeah, that
Why haven't they
actually
done
really
that?
works within the Democratic Party, too. Look, I think everybody needs to come up with an idea. If you're near San Jose, California in the last few days and you saw 20 inches of rain in 48 hours, you know that climate change or extremity is something that people are dealing with. Unfortunately, it's been politicized. And you've got to be on one side or the other about whether or not the weather is changing or the climate is changing. If it's your neighborhood and you're feeling it, then you need to put pressure on your people. So I would say to Chuck Schumer, since, you know, Nancy Pelosi's in California, she's calling it the Green Dream. She says she has a lot of suggestions. I think within your party, Marie, it is a conversation because you guys are driving it right now with one of your superstars, AOC.
Wait, I just want to know, are you blaming the conflict in Syria on the environment rather than Bashar al-Assad?
No, there are a number of people who looked at when the unrest first started in 2011.
It's not caused by him?
Can I finish? Please, Melissa, before you start laughing about this, there are national security analysts who's looked at this who said one of the reasons that people were willing to go fight against the regime that contributed to the unrest, that contributed to the uprising, was the fact that there was a serious famine and drought in the country, and that they were mad that the government wasn't addressing it. Often these civil wars start because of very personal issues. The reason a Tunisian fruit vendor set himself on fire and started the Arab Spring was because of his own economic issues. So yes, it absolutely contributed to one of the reasons that there were people willing to stand up to the regime. Then Assad cracked down, and now we are
the
where
other
we are.
side of this.
But that's actually just a fact.
Look,
and it wasn't his response to that famine and the way that he didn't help his people.
Not every scientist in the community that they claim to be citing agrees that climate change is only man-made. I'm from Arizona. The Grand Canyon used to be under an ocean. The climate changes, changing for billions of years. We shouldn't destroy our economy because we're the ones who aren't polluting. Talk to China and India, and the way the military gets around is through gas and fossil fuels. So how are you going to fix that?
To further that, Katie, and kind of on the heels of what I was saying, personal experience is what we're talking about. No, that's what the politicization has been so negative about. Do we really need the root cause to be only men and women on the planet? Can we accept the fact that on the entree to the last ice age, it looked a little bit like what we're feeling right now? I don't know anybody who can control an ice age, but it doesn't mean that it's not real that people are feeling.
And addressing it won't ruin our economy, but this is a conversation we can talk about for much more time. New developments, though, this is an important story. As two nuclear neighbors face off, Pakistan saying it will release a captured Indian fighter pilot. What this means for tensions in the region, General Jack Keane on what he expects. You won't want to miss this. Stay tuned.